Hi, Brian. Two questions. Obviously, he's had a bit of an injury history. What's your understanding of his health now? And did that playoff series he had 2 years ago, obviously that's the player you want to require because he was pretty dominant.
Yes, he was. First, his injury history. I mean, he had a concussion last year. He had a rib cartilage contact injury. From my perspective, that means the guy is not afraid to get hit, and he had a broken foot based, I think, on a block shot. We like those two as far as not the injuries, but the block shots. And the hip injury is something, in fact, some team doctors call it a hockey hip. You get some inflammation. At some point, if it becomes too acute, you need to have a surgical procedure. But until that time comes, many players play with the pain and have it treated with massage and active tissue release and different techniques to manage the stiffness or pain. So there's a whole bunch of NHL players that have played 1, 2, or multiple seasons beyond that with this discomfort, this injury, if you will, and not had the surgery. Other players get the surgery. So it's not something that we're worried about, and it's not a factor from our standpoint. He did have a magical playoff a couple years ago. This is a guy who was a very high pick. He brings size, foot speed, skill, and this is a guy that we think can make a difference on our hockey team. So this is something we talked about doing earlier in the year, decided not to, and then when Paul and I revisited it this weekend, we both decided it might make sense.
I wondered, have you talked to Randy at all? And maybe do you have a sense of where James might fit, how you might best utilize those assets that you talked about, his size and his foot speed? And I assume you're imagining him playing on the power play as well.
Yes, I have talked to Randy a bit briefly. Where he plays and with whom he plays is up to the coach. He has played a fair amount of center in his career. He was a center until he turned pro. I envision him mostly on the wall, but if Randy wants to try him in the middle, that's fine too. But from my perspective, again, we're not big enough up front, and this is a guy. Not that he plays huge. He's not a big banger, but he's a big body with skill, and those people are hard to eliminate. So, Randy will figure out where he plays, but I envision him being in the top 6, which would mean on one of the power play units, and I think I know he's played point on the power play before, so that'll be up to the coaching staff. But this is a guy that we think can help us a lot.
Brian, can you talk a little bit about losing Luke? And earlier today you spoke about having some assets. Obviously, you had some defensemen you could move to get this guy.
Well, I usually start these calls off by thanking the player, and I kind of got surprised when Jesse started the call. I thought I'd have a chance to speak off the top. So let me do that now. I want to thank Luke for his hard work as a Leaf. We never had any issues with Luke as far as him as a person, as a player, his work ethic, his approach to practice, his approach to games. He's a quality person and a good hockey player, and we thank him for the time he spent here, and we wish him well with Philadelphia. You can't get quality in a trade without giving up quality. Paul Holmgren's too smart for that. So we had to put a good hockey player on the table to get a good hockey player. I think it's a team trade that will benefit both teams. I think both these players have their best hockey in front of them, and we're certainly hopeful that James, we call him JVR, that James will help us, and we're confident that Luke will also help the Philadelphia Flyers. I think it's a treat for a player to be able to play with his brother, and I think Luke is going to do some good things for the Philadelphia Flyers, and I hope he does. He's a good man.
Hi, Brian. Paul Holmgren talked about how this trade took a long time, or you have been discussing it for a long time. Can you talk about maybe what the genesis of the trade originally was and why it took it so long to finally be completed now today?
Well, it might be because we're both cautious about moving players that we believe in. We did discuss it mid-season and decided to table it at that point. I think James was injured or got injured, and so we decided to table it. And when we revisited it, we didn't say right away, let's do this. We both slept. We talked about it, and we slept on it, and took some time. So I'd say it kind of evolved in the last 48 hours, 72 hours, and then we decided that we would do it. So some trades occur quickly. Some take, weeks. Some take much longer than that. This one probably falls in the category of once we focused on it and decided it might work, we did it quickly.
And it's obviously you're looking at James van Riemsdyk as what he can give you offensively. How much of what you're looking for offensively is going to help, or are you hoping will help the power play?
Well, our power play. It's funny. Our power play. I find it interesting that teams' power plays aren't always a reflection of their personnel as much as the execution of the game plan. And there are teams, with like Pittsburgh has been an example in recent years where they've had years where their power play wasn't in the top 10, and you look at the personnel and you say, well, gee, their power play should be in the top 10. And then there's a tendency to criticize the coaches, and I think Pittsburgh has pretty good coaches. So there's times when your power play becomes dysfunctional because the players don't execute. I think James can help on the power play. We've got two wingers that play on the power play now that are both pretty effective in Joffrey Lupul and Phil Kessel. Whether James can play there on the second unit then, or if he's going to play the point on the power play or play in the middle, again, that'll be up to Randy. But I think the answer to your question is yes, we believe he can help the power play.
Brian, it's no secret that the idea of a big man in the middle has been attractive for quite a while here. You mentioned the possibility of him maybe playing some center. Does this in any way alter your plans as to filling that position?
No, I still see him as a winger. Like I say, that'll be up to the coaching staff where he plays. We're very happy with the progress of a couple of the centers in the system. Joe Colburn, who had a phenomenal first half. Production fell off in the second half, and then he played in the playoffs with a shattered finger. So we think, that we really believe that Joe's going to come in and make a push to stick on the team. Nazem Kadri's another guy, plays on the wall and in the middle. He's another guy that's going to get a good look. So we may have an internal solution. It may be the coaches in training camp want to try JVR up the middle. But that's up to the coaches. We certainly, as I acquire him today, I think of him as a winger.
Hi, Brian. It's Lance again. Can you just talk about the day Randy was hired? You talked about reshaping this team a bit to suit Randy. Is this one of the moves towards that? Obviously, you're not done. You got some more work to do this summer. But is this a good first step for you?
Well, my focus since I got here has been to try and bring in players that bring our skill level up. And at the same time, we've added some guys that, in my model where you go top six, bottom six, we've tried to add some sandpaper as well with the Mike Browns and players like that, Colton Orr, that group. And obviously, we haven't hit on a winning formula. With Randy, I think we're more in sync in terms of how we like our teams to be built and how our teams play. But I don't want to create any illusion or delusion coming in that we're acquiring James van Riemsdyk as a physical presence. This is not a big banger. This is a guy who uses his size when he should. He uses it to create offensive opportunities. He uses it down low, and he's responsible and reliable on his own end. This is not a guy who's going to put people through the glass. The fact that he's big, sometimes people look at a big player and say, oh, he's big, so he should play tough. This is a skilled player with size that uses his size effectively. This is not a black and blue player. This is not a plow horse. This is a thoroughbred.
There are no further questions registered at this time. I would now like to turn the meeting back over to Mr. Burke.
Okay, just one last thing, Pat. Sorry. I do want to thank the Monster also. Obviously, we executed a conditional trade today in an effort to give the Winnipeg Jets a head start on signing the Monster as a backup goaltender. The Monster played some real good hockey for us, saved our bacon during the last season several times. But I think it's time for us to move on and for him to move on, and I want to thank him. He worked extremely hard here. He's a great kid, and I want to thank him for that and wish him well as well.